All right, so next study is examining ways of preventing conflict in the workplace. And the questions that were asked here were how do employees deal with conflict at this company? Which I don't know, JSC DOM.RF, it's a Russian company. And then what suggestions for preventing workplace conflict can be derived from these results? So this study is somewhat of a case study in a way. What they do essentially is they give this company a Thomas Kilmann instrument, one of those assessments, have them fill it out, and then kind of analyze the majority of styles that they have in the workplace. And then kind of they group categories generally of the Thomas Kilmann assessment to figure out how much conflict is more likely in certain groups rather than others. So as I mentioned, this company is a Russian company, and it implements government initiatives to improve the quality of affordability of housing. And in the past few years, this company has expanded. They have added like a service center to help with the operational functions of the business, including customer service. And so the participants who were part of this study they work in the contact center as specialists, and they do a bunch of different things, including assisting customers and citizens on issues related to banking, mortgage lending, financing programs, and more. And specialists make up over half of the company's employees and are the most likely exposed to conflict just because they work in customer service. So that's why this study focused on them primarily. And so 15 specialists were asked to fill out this 30-question Thomas Kilmann assessment. And they were measuring confrontation, cooperation, compromise, evasion, and adaptation. And then they grouped the data, the results from these questionnaires into categories based on the degree of manifestation of these styles, from low to medium to high. Low meaning you're getting a lower score on it, high meaning you're getting a higher score. And the result here is the following. So under half, around 47% scored low in confrontation, 53% scoring average and high overall. 73% had a higher average intensity of being cooperative, and 27% scored low in this area. And then 87% of participants showed higher average levels in compromise, evasion, and adaptation, with 13% indicating low levels of compromising, evasive, and adapting behavior. And so overall, what they found is, so the authors took this data from the results and grouped it into whether or not the prevalence of certain conflict styles contribute to its constructive resolution. And so, for example, the author suggested that in general, high or medium levels of cooperation and compromise, low levels of confrontation, and evasion and adaptation could lead to the constructive resolution of conflict in general. And then on the other hand, higher levels of medium levels of confrontation, evasion, and adaptation, and low levels of cooperation and compromise may not lead to the constructive resolution of conflict. And so with this, they found that 47% of the participants generally contribute constructively to the resolution of conflict, and then around 53% of the participants generally do not. And the key takeaway that they found here, they presented several suggestions for this organization specifically and for organizations in general, were that organizations should offer conflict resolution training to employees to allow them to impartially evaluate conflicts, adjust their behavior mid-conflict to reduce the chances of negative consequences from conflict, and by extension, increase team coordination and cohesion. And they said to consider using the TKI to better understand their employees and for employees to better understand themselves, and that it could be helpful potentially in hiring and onboarding processes. So overall, I think it's it's a good case study. Although part of me, with the TKI, like I was taught under the methodology or the understanding that the TKI, that certain styles are more preferred depending on the situation. So, some people I think of confrontation and maybe evasion as just always being bad, but I think that that's not always the case. Sometimes it's the best thing to do to avoid a conflict, and sometimes it's the best thing to do to just confront it straight on. So that's the one area of difficulty that I have with this, but otherwise I think it's still relevant.
Yeah. bring up a good point. I mean, this is the issue that I always have with sort of personality tests or communication tests, TKA, that kind of stuff. Is like everything is so contextual, and depending on the particular relationship you have with this individual, the particular situation itself, the style in which you go about resolving it can totally vary. So I don't know how. I mean, I don't. Does anyone else have any suggestions on how valuable those kinds of conflict management style tests are? Like what we could use those for, what they would be valuable for?
I think what this key takeaway points out is very valid and vital in these types of assessments about understanding yourself a little bit better. It's self-awareness and understanding your colleagues a little bit better, especially with the conflict styles, but even those communication assessments like the DISC, and I know that there's some other ones, but but I think that I agree, Jeremy and Noah, that there's different situations call for different kind of responses, right? And especially when it comes to conflict. So there's not like a cookie cutter answer for this is good and this is bad and this is right and this is wrong. But I do think that taking these assessments help you to know yourself a little bit more. And self-awareness is huge when it comes to managing conflicts, because you're analyzing it a little bit differently when you know, oh, this is the style I lean towards more. However, I know that my triggers, when in this situation, I'm gonna probably be more competitive, or so knowing that about yourself, I think is what I would say the strongest takeaway would be from taking these types of assessments.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that too, Sarah.
Yeah, self-awareness is a huge piece. I wonder, would be really cool too is if we had an assessment, and I haven't seen something like this, but there was a conflict style assessment that was very specific about the situation. So it would give you like a little blurb about, if you were in this situation with your supervisor, how would you respond? If you were in this situation with your coworker, how would you respond? And it can be very contextual.
So they do that with the TKI. Jeremy, I believe, because I talked to the Kilman guy from this organization, this company, about they have the COSI. It's like the Kilman Organizational Conflict.
Yeah. But see, I took that, and I don't remember seeing something like that.
No, because did you pay for it? You have to pay for it, and then they customize it for your organization. So they'll ask you specific questions about your organization so that they can change the questions that they ask on the assessment. And then
okay. I took it as an individual. I think I did pay for it, but it was like I don't know, $50 or something like that. But I took it as an individual. Okay. But I didn't. So then I don't remember that was.
I don't know if it would have been that one, the organizational, the COSI, because that is much more group oriented. So I don't know that one person would do that. I could be wrong though. But my understanding was that was more of a, okay, we want to contextualize this for your specific organization to see how people respond to common organizational conflicts, task-oriented conflicts, and whatnot that you have within this team. The TKI is so general.
Right.
The TKI assessment is so general, so it doesn't ask specific questions. But there are we've actually used the TKI assessment and tweaked it a little bit with some of our clients to ask more specific questions. So you can kind of change it around to do that. But I think it's really interesting if you were to ask, both like personal questions and then also work related questions to see the difference. I've had just dialogues about this before, and it was really interesting to see the drastic difference in how someone would choose to respond to a conflict in work versus with a family member.
Oh yeah. No, I think we could totally develop a very kind of short survey instrument that we could make it very contextual if we thought this would be valuable in some way.
I know at least for the for this assessment itself, even just for the individual level, kind of to what you were both saying earlier. But when I first took this, I think I was probably the beginning of my master's program, or maybe when I was still in college. But I remember I think I scored highest on avoiding conflict because I was like, well, that's a good thing, right? Like we don't want conflict in our life, so it sounds like I aced this. And so this test was like the beginning of like understanding. Okay, well, maybe this isn't good. And so I feel like especially when you score like really high on things like avoidance and it's not a test, yeah. Score really high in things like avoidance and confrontation. If you're avoiding every conflict or confronting every conflict, then it's, I think this is a good wake up call to being like, oh yeah, like maybe I need to look at this a little differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I think of Jeremy, your how you introduce the APE spectrum of communication to in your trainings about, okay, everyone has a tendency to fall on one of these, but you change depending on the situation. It's the same with these conflict styles, right? Yeah, like as Noah says, oh, he scored highest on avoiding, but that doesn't mean always like he's always avoiding conflict. It just means, yeah.
Well, I think too, like I like the self-awareness piece is important because I think there is no, I don't think there is some right or wrong way of going about communicating or resolving conflict. So I think the whole point of training and like self-awareness is just, can I be more conscious and deliberate about the strategy or the style I'm choosing to use for this situation, as opposed to just like defaulting into one without even thinking about it.
Absolutely. Yeah.